Okay, now I'm rolling. Okay.
Hi, I'm Anita Chan. I'm a postdoc at the City University of New York under the Committee for Globalization and Social Change.
And what's your connection with OLPC?
For my dissertation project, I had done some research on information, ICT-based development projects in Peru, and so looked at the project, the Digital Education Initiative that was run under the Ministry of Education in Peru prior to the implementation of one laptop per child. So I looked at the predecessor to one laptop per child, so the sort of foundational architecture to what later became the deployment of one laptop per child in Peru.
Okay. And what was sort of the, I guess it can be kind of non-specific, sort of the moment that sort of got you hooked into this sort of journey, if you will?
Let's see. I was really excited. I had a lot of friends who were involved in the free software movement in Peru. I was very excited about looking in the early 2000s at the ways that they had really decided to make government a kind of talking point or a point of intersection for them as a community, as an activist-based community in Peru. This really distinct in some ways to what we were seeing happening in free software communities based in the US, where there was some reticence around trying to make states or governments, this is in the early 2000s, really necessarily like a point of intersection. But across Latin America, we were seeing all this fervor around trying to get, for instance, free software legislation passed in public institutions. So we saw this in Argentina, Mexico, Chile, and in Peru. And Peru was really interesting because it's not, and in Brazil, of course, unlike some of the other countries that I just mentioned, Peru isn't really thought of as being a site of software production, and not necessarily having like a really strong base of even free software-based production either, but there was a really fervent, politically minded activist community, largely a user-based community, but still some producer networks as well in Peru. And so it was sort of a conundrum in terms of why was there such fervent activity there? And I really think it had a lot to do with looking, there was a lot of NGO, I mean, Peru has a very political activism around NGOs and the state, I mean, has a very, post-1980s, has a very long and developed history. So I think it had a lot to do with NGO support.
Oh,
so
okay.
which made it what's the kind of the answer to why free software-based activism was so fervent in Peru in the early 2000s. But
and then, so I guess you no doubt have been following what's going on in Peru now with the act. So I'm curious, what kind of surprises have you had? What kind of predictions do you feel like were fulfilled?
Right. Well, I haven't been following what's been going on with the EXO deployment so closely, actually. And so it's. I mean, I know the basics, I think, of in terms of what, and I'm excited to see, I think what a lot of people have been excited to see in terms of, it's been a gradually expanding project for the Peruvian government. So I left Peru as they were transitioning into the One Laptop Per Child project. It was previously Plan Huascarán, and so initially it had been some pilot projects when I was leaving Peru and finishing up my fieldwork. It was some pilot projects rurally based in some of the provinces that weren't too far away from Lima. And they looked, some of the early results I think that were coming in looked pretty promising. The schools were really excited to receive the laptops. Teachers were really excited to be able to receive some new attention from not just bases, from government-based, local government and national government bases, but also international bases as well. So, so I left Peru during this sort of moment of real excitement, and I guess since then the deployments have expanded, right? So we first saw announcements of what was it, like 40,000 to 200,000 to 350,000 to now they want to make it a nationally based program. It's hard to say what all those numbers mean. I'm not by any means prepared to make any kind of assessment. I'm not sure maybe other people are. But nonetheless, I think it's an interesting moment to see such. This is all post 2007, to see a really rapid transition happen from pilot programs. I know we're all living in internet time, but to go from 2007 to, 3 years later, from pilot programs to now a nationally based program, I mean, that's a pretty rapid transition. And I think something that bespeaks some kind of utility that the state is seeing around this program. So, yeah, so I think that would be an interesting thing to kind of, it's good in the sense that I think it will bring more research attention to Peru around what's happening in education and digital education specifically.
Okay. Now it's 5 minutes, but if you have some time, a difficult
Yes.
moment and a bit of wisdom to share.
Difficult moment. Well, I will say this from the Peruvian perspective, and I think I shared this during in Plan Huascarán. And I will say this as someone who looked at Plan Huascarán, not OLPC. So I'll reference that, and I brought this up during the Q&A in this session as well. But a difficult moment was. So collecting stories from some of the teachers who have participated in the Plan Huascarán project before, and so working at some of the provinces, and in one of these provinces, a principal of a rurally based school who, it takes, let's see, you can't fly into this area, you have to take buses, it's an 8-hour bus ride. It's a mountain-based community. Most of the families that are part of this community are all agriculturally based and they're farmers. In the town, there's been a local controversy that has to do with a large transnational mine that's come in, and the principal of the school, in order to keep the Plan Huascarán project funded, tried to negotiate a relationship between the school and the mine, between their social responsibility office and branch. Of course, the mine was very happy to do so, but the community protested this principle. There were marches across supposedly. I mean, what he was narrating to me was that there were marches across the plaza and around the school, and so just thinking about what the kind of political that technology is a deeply politicized object, and to think through some of the relationships that oftentimes can get sacrificed in the wake of what looks like a really successful, from Plan Huascarán's point of view, successful technological deployment, but then seeing the position of this teacher, of this principal, in many ways become. I mean, he definitely saw himself as being a kind of almost not a sacrificial lamb of sorts, but I mean, his community wasn't supporting him in a decision that he felt like was in the interest of the community. So taking some of those local debates really seriously and trying to anticipate some of the political context in which technology is being deployed, I think that's, for me, was a heart-wrenching moment, is what I'm trying to say. So I hope that helps.
Okay. Excellent. And was that the bit of wisdom too, kind of?
The bit of wisdom, sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. To try and anticipate some of the politicized contexts. Yeah, right. So there are some. I come from STS, Science Technology Studies, as a background. I'm trained in that, and I guess one of my bit of wisdom would be there's some nice scholarship by Susan Lee Starr around this concept called boundary objects, and technology is definitely a boundary object. And one part of the thing that she looks at is this notion of multiple kinds of interests that circulate around one particular kind of object, and the way that it can organize all of those interests. So to consider the multiple interests and not just presume that it's just a single kind of interest would be my bit of wisdom. So if that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay.
Excellent.
Great.
Hey, thanks a lot.